That means we get along. What is that? Cash and a son his whole life. He had been lying there for 4 days when they found him. There was no doctor or help, just pain. Gene Barry, who played Bat Masterson on TV and was loved by many, had fallen and hit his head so hard that it was bleeding. The fancy nursing home didn't even try to call 911, though. It was too late by the time they did something. It's only the beginning of a Hollywood horror story that people didn't see coming when they heard the shocking truth about his last days. Gene Barry was born in Manhattan, New York City, on June 14, 1919. His name was Eugene Klass. Martin Klass and Eva Kahn, his parents, were Russian Jews who came to the United States and loved music very much. Martin played the violin for fun, but he also worked as a jeweler. Eva liked to sing, and she filled their house with music. Eugene's early years were shaped by them, and they taught him a lot about music. He grew up in Brooklyn at 1446 59th Street, where he was introduced to a lot of different cultures that shaped his art. It wasn't always easy, like during the Great Depression. Even though they didn't have much money, his parents always praised his skills. They thought that their son's musical talent was worth developing no matter how hard things got. Eugene was already a very good violin player by the time he got to New Utrecht High School. He wanted to work in classical music because of how much his father loved playing the instrument. But during a high school football game, everything changed. His dreams of becoming a professional guitarist were dashed when he hurt his arm badly. The accident was terrible. He had always lived for music. Now the one thing he had worked so hard for was out of his reach. His mind wasn't on giving up, it was on something else. His voice. A part of his life had always been singing, but now it was his main love. He found out that he had a great baritone voice that could open up new opportunities. He got a scholarship to the Chatham Square School of Music when he was only 17. David Sarnoff, the head of RCA, gave it to him. It was a moment that changed everything. He got official training through the scholarship, which helped him improve his skills and get ready for bigger chances. He learned singing techniques and music theory while working as a singer in nightclubs and on radio shows for 2 years. To make money, he did any job he could get. Some gigs ended, while others went on. He was fired from a job at a bar after only 1 week, but he never gave up. Because he won a skill contest on Arthur Godfrey's Skill Scouts, more people saw him. He was making a name for himself, little by little. He made an important choice around this time. He had to come up with a name that fit his goals. He picked the name Gene Barry because of the actor John Barrymore. It was more than just a name change. That song was a statement of who he wanted to be as a performer, a star who could steal the show anywhere. He was determined, and it paid off when he got parts in Broadway shows like New Moon in 1942. When Sigmund Romberg's operetta was brought back to life, he was only 23 years old and played Captain Paul Duval. This was a big step forward for a young talent from Brooklyn. Barry was born Eugene Klass and trained his voice at the Chatham Square School of Music for many years. Because of his grant, he was able to improve his skills, and he had already appeared in semi-staged operettas at Carnegie Hall before he went to Broadway. The New Moon was a story set in New Orleans in the 18th century that was full of love and political drama. Barry was able to show off his skills in this play. His strong voice and commanding personality caught the attention of both fans and critics. In that year, he won the Theatre World Award, which is a prestigious prize for great Broadway debuts. Because of this success, he decided to change his name and become an entertainer. He changed his name to Gene Barry because he looked up to John Barrymore. In 1944, after 2 years, he joined the group of Catherine West Great, a Broadway show directed by the famous Mae West. He played Lieutenant Boonin, but that wasn't the most important thing about the experience. It was getting to know Betty Kelb. She was in the company and went by the stage name Julie Carson. Barry and Betty became friends during practice, and their friendship quickly grew into something more. There was trouble in their love story. Mae West was said to not want another blonde on stage because she liked to be in charge of every aspect of her shows. Betty had been covering up her light hair with a dark wig, but West fired her before the show even started when he found out. At that point, things could have gone wrong, but it turned out to be the start of something much more important. Barry and Betty kept seeing each other, and on October 22, 1944, they got married. They were married for almost 60 years, which is very unusual in show business. They were born with 2 sons, Michael in 1946 and Frederick in 1953. In 1967, they adopted a girl named Elizabeth. Betty only worked in theater for a short time, but she was the key to Barry's success and helped him move from Broadway to Hollywood. Barry had a hard time getting noticed on Broadway, even though The New Moon and Catherine Was Great were big hits. He had parts in plays like Rosalinda, which was based on Die Fledermaus, and The Would-Be Gentleman by Molière. But these achievements didn't do much to raise his status. His part as Falk didn't give him the big break he had hoped for, even though Rosalinda ran for 2 years. Barry had to get jobs outside of the theater to make money at times because there wasn't enough work. In 1944, after quitting Catherine Was Great, he couldn't find work. He worked for anyone who would hire him, even selling gold. Even though things were hard, he wouldn't give up. When Hollywood took notice, that's when things changed. Barry was on the show Hollywood Screen Test in 1951. The show was meant to show off new talent. Paramount Pictures liked it so much that they signed him to a deal. Hollywood was changing because of TV at the time, and Barry was a part of that change. His first few years at Paramount were good, but the jobs weren't always great. He was put in B movies, but his natural charm made him stand out even in those. In the Cold War thriller The Atomic City, 1952, which was his first movie role, he played Dr. Frank Addison, a nuclear scientist whose son is taken by foreign spies. At the time, Los Alamos, New Mexico was a secret government site where the movie was filmed. Because they didn't have that much access, the movie felt more real than most movies have before. The script was nominated for an Academy Award, and Barry's act helped him become a good leading man. His career was picking up speed, and the next year brought an even bigger chance. His big break came when he played the lead role in the 1953 sci-fi classic The War of the Worlds. The classic book by H.G. Wells was turned into a movie set in California in the 1950s by Byron Haskin and George Powell. The scientist Dr. Clayton Forrester was played by Barry. He was stuck in the middle of an alien invasion. The movie won an Academy Award for its groundbreaking special effects, and its themes of survival and scientific finding hit home at a time when people were getting more worried about the Cold War. It was just the right amount of calm, smart, and driven in Barry's performance. Getting the major role in one of the most famous sci-fi movies of the time solidified his place as a Hollywood star. By 1955, he was working with some of the biggest names in the business. In Soldier of Fortune, a Cold War thriller set in Hong Kong, he was in it with Clark Gable and Susan Hayward. Barry played writer Louis Hoyt, who was jailed in communist China on spying charges. The movie's story is mostly about Hayward's character, who fights to free his character with the help of Gable's smuggler-turned-hero. Even though Gable was the star of the show, Barry's acting made the story more interesting. He showed that he could compete with Hollywood stars. The movie had a lot of goals. Hayward's scenes were shot on studio backlots, while Gable's scenes were shot on location in Hong Kong, which made them seem more real. Barry saw it as a chance to try new things as an actor, but Hollywood still had a certain view of him. That turned out to be hard for him. For a starring man, he had the looks, the charm, and the presence. He kept getting the same types of jobs, though. In the 1954 musical Western Red Garters, he played a well-dressed cowboy. Barry later said he wished he had been given different types of parts. It was getting old for him to always play the perfect gentleman. He wanted to play dads, granddads, and other normal people. Gene, when it first aired on NBC in 1958, Barry's Bat Masterson was a new kind of TV show. It was the middle of the Western craze, but this show's hero was different. Barry played a police officer who was smooth, smart, and always in charge instead of a rough-and-tough cowboy. He wore a pinstriped suit, a black derby hat, and a cane with a gold tip that wasn't just for looks. He could fight with it if he had to. He liked to settle disagreements with his brains rather than his arms, though. For 3 years, from October 8, 1958 to June 1, 1961, 107 half-hour episodes of the show aired. It was based on the real William Barclay Bat Masterson, who was a reporter, gambler, and police officer from the Old West. It was said that the real Masterson dressed very well and carried a cane that the folks of Dodge City gave him when he was sheriff. These small things were turned into something bigger on the show. Barry's Bat Masterson was a charming and smart man who stood out in a field full of tough gunslingers. From the first episode, Bat Masterson captivated viewers. Bill Lee's The Ballad of Bat Masterson, the show's opening theme song, set the scene for a Western hero like no other. Masterson didn't stay in one place. He went from town to town to help people who were in trouble. The show had a lighter, more fun tone than other Westerns of the time because he was good at getting out of tough situations without getting violent. Audiences and critics both loved it. Gene Barry played the part with a lot of energy and fun. His ability to deliver sharp dialogue with confidence gave the show a theatrical quality that made it stand out from the rest. This made Masterson a character that people remembered long after the show finished, was up for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Actor in 1959. Also up for an award was the show itself for Outstanding Editing. Barry became a big TV star when Bat Masterson did well. He had been in movies like The Atomic City, 1952, before getting the part, but this was the part that made or broke his career. By the end of the 1950s, Westerns were the most popular shows on TV. Gunsmoke, Wagon Train, and Rawhide were some of the shows that, at the time, one of the most well-known. By giving people something new, Bat Masterson found its own place. People got a Western hero who relied on brains and charm instead of another moody, gun-toting cowboy. Soon after, merchandise with Barry's picture appeared. Young fans liked collecting comic books, toys, and other things. The show stopped in 1961, but it kept going with reruns that brought new people into the world of Bat Masterson for many years. Bat Masterson was taken off the show for years, but Gene Barry came back to play the part. He played an older Bat Masterson in an episode of Guns of Paradise called A Gathering of Guns in 1990. Hugh O'Brian played Wyatt Earp, one of the most famous TV cops of all time. Barry played the part again the next year in The Gambler Returns: The Luck of the Draw. This movie was made for TV and came out in 1991. It had well-known Western TV actors. It was a celebration of the history of the genre, and Barry's appearance made people remember why Bat Masterson was such a great show. When Gene Barry played Amos Burke in Burke's Law in 1963, his career took a big turn for the better. He was best known before that for playing a Western police officer. Everything changed because of this show. Barry played a rich officer who led the LAPD Homicide Division from 1963 to 1966. It was an interesting idea. Even though Amos Burke had a lot of money, he decided to spend his whole life solving crimes. It seems likely that he got his money from an inheritance and smart investments. It let him live in style while still going after crooks. Barry was right for the part. Burke was both charismatic and powerful because of the way he spoke and acted. He got a Golden Globe for Best Actor in 1965 for his role. Burke's Law stood out because it was classy, funny, and mysterious all at the same time. This wasn't like other police shows. Burke wasn't a police officer in a noisy office wearing a trench coat. He lived in fancy places and solved murders with charm and skill as a high society detective. Aaron Spelling, the producer, once said that Barry looked good in a suit, and he played Burke just like that. The figure was famous for the funny lines he said, which became known as Burke's Laws. It became a style of the show to say things like, "Never ask a question unless you already know the answer." The show was even more interesting because of how Burke went through his world. He did more than just drive to crime scenes. His driver took him around in a 1962 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud II. This car wasn't just a showy item. With an early form of a car phone, which was revolutionary in the early 960S, it became an iconic part of the show. Burke was a unique figure because of the difference between his fancy life and his serious detective work. He lived in a huge 19-room house full of luxury, but he was still very dedicated to doing what was right. The guest stars on Burke's Law were another thing that made it stand out. A lot of famous people were on the show, which made the murder cases even more exciting. She wrote that this style impacted later shows like Columbo and Murder, where famous guest stars became big draws. Burke's Law was a big hit because it had a lot of wonder, style, and humor. But it didn't stop there. It caused other things to change, too. CBS brought Burke's Law back in 1994, almost 30 years after the first season finished. Gene Barry came back as Amos Burke, who was now deputy chief. The show added a new twist this time. Burke worked with his son Peter, who was played by Peter Barton. Many of the original show's features were kept in the revival, such as the fancy sets, sharp dialogue, and of course, Burke's famous one-liners. It also had guest stars from popular spy shows from the 1960s, like The Avengers and I Spy, which made longtime fans feel nostalgic. Even with all of these changes, the version from the 1990s never quite captured the magic of the first one. Younger people didn't connect with it as much, and critics thought it was too silly and not intellectual. The story of Burke's past changed a lot. In the revival, he was a widower who had raised his son with the help of Henry, his servant. This gave the character more depth, but it also took away some of the mysterious, high society freedom that made the first one so memorable. Even though the entertainment business changed, Gene Barry kept changing too. In 1968, he played Glenn Howard in The Name of the Game, an ambitious NBC show that ran until 1971. This was one of his most famous parts. The show was different from anything else on TV at the time because it had 3 stars who switched places. Each 90-minute episode cost about $400,000, making it the most expensive show ever made at the time. Barry played Glenn Howard, who was a wealthy and powerful publisher who ran Howard Publications. He wasn't just a boss. He did a lot of detective work and was often in charge of cases with a lot at stake. His character was in charge of 2 reporters, Tony Franciosa as Jeff Dillon and Robert Stack as Dan Farrell. They were looking into corruption and problems like government scandals and environmental crimes. The first episode, A Fear of High Places, was a political story that set the tone for the rest of the show. Barry gave Glenn Howard the right amount of authority and charm, which made him one of the show's most memorable characters. Through its 3 seasons and 76 episodes, The Name of the Game became an important part of television history. It paved the way for later variety shows like The Bold Ones and NBC Mystery Movie. It had been years since Barry had a big hit on TV, but in 1983, La Cage aux Folles was his big return to Broadway. He played Georges, the owner of a gay bar in Saint-Tropez, and starred with George Hearn as Albin. Based on a French play from 1973, the show was a big deal. It was the first big hit on Broadway to be about a gay romance, bringing LGBTQ+ issues to a wider audience in a way that hadn't been done before. Barry's performance was moving and full of depth. He didn't play into stereotypes. Instead, he showed George as a loving and caring partner who cared about his family. He was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Actor in 1984 for his work in the... Barry thought that La Cage aux Folles was the best part of his career, even though he lost to his co-star Hearn. The show itself was a huge success. It ran for more than 4 years, had 1,761 performances, and won 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. After his run on Broadway, Barry continued with the touring show and performed in big places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. Barry enjoyed acting with his wife Betty Claire Kalb in addition to work on TV and Broadway. They were in a lot of shows together, like Fiddler on the Roof, Barry played TV, and musicals like No No Nanette and On a Clear Day You Can See Forever. Though he didn't have as many movie roles in the 1970s, they did more shows together. They also worked in small cabaret shows where Barry sang by himself, like Gene Barry did in one of them. His job with Betty wasn't just to keep him busy. It showed how close they were to each other. Before Betty died in 2003, they were married for almost 60 years. Through their stage shows, stayed in touch with his love of performing in front of live crowds, and shared his love of music and stories with the person who meant the most to him. Gene Barry and Betty Claire Kalb met in the strangest way possible and fell in love. She was an actor who went by the name Julie Carson on stage. In 1944, she had a part in the play Catherine Was Great, which starred Mae West. But there was something wrong. Betty lost her part because Mae West wouldn't work with blondes. She did not want to give up. She tried out again, but this time she wore a dark wig. It worked. She got the part back. She also met Gene Barry by chance. It wasn't even meant to be romantic when they met for the first time. They were on 2 dates with different people.